screen amongst articles that I should read. Normally I just pass over those things on the entry screens. Be it down the center or whatever, but this one from The Guardian: news is bad for you, and giving up reading it will make you happier. I would add watching here. We're continuing our sermon series on happiness. As mentioned before, the Psalms begin with the word happy. Happy is the man, blessed is the man. Happiness is not an emotional state, it is a condition of being blessed in a condition of synergy with the grace of God. And the Greek word is makarios. That we're looking for there. There's other Greek words for happiness too, but we're focusing on that one. A state of being blessed by God. And I must say, years ago, it was in the mid-2000s, I think, I had decided for a whole year that I wasn't going to watch the news at all. In fact, one of our parishioners got upset at me because I seemed to be out of touch with the news, and the complaint was that I never did a sermon on the news. Well, I got to tell you, I always think it's not very good to do so. Last week was an exception because we were right after Saturday's massacre. But normally, I don't think it's good to watch the news so much. And the reason is because it's one-sided. It's negative. And that's what drives ratings. And in fact, already we know, right, that that's how social media works, right? The more audacious, you can make a post or something of that nature, the more clicks it gets, and you can actually make money off of those things if you get popular enough, and so on. So the same thing with the news, right? Makes you want to turn it on again, right? If you watch too much of it for a day and you turn it on later to see what's the latest thing happening in politics or whatever. And these things are not good. So, but these are actually scientific facts. Some of them one of the points there's a bunch of points. First of all, news is irrelevant to most of us. We don't think it is, but literally most of the stuff we see on the news is irrelevant. So instead they have to say, Donald Trump's today doing something again to ruin our country, right? Just like it was Barack Obama before who was ruining our country, and then it was George Bush, and then it was Bill Clinton ruining our country, and so on and so on. But the real truth is, most days, really, the news is completely irrelevant to our lives and has no bearing on it. News has no explanatory power, and that's another thing, right? So instead we get a bunch of talking heads explaining what the news is all the time. The news is toxic to your body, so we do know that this is true. It constantly triggers the limbic system. Panicky stories spur the release of cortisol, right? And which deregulates our immune system. So we know it's physically bad for our body. So, And so for that reason, years ago, I decided that I was going to stay away from news altogether on Saturday, except for one kind of news. The good news, the gospel, which is what the gospel means. The gospel does not mean truth, it means the good news. Because if we're not reading the good news as much as we're listening to and reading, bad news, and we might not even think we read that much news, right? But still something pops across our screen and hit it, and turn on the TV, right? We watch the news, but then stay tuned. For our next story is how someone else is going to blow up the world, right? And so that's every day after. Newsflash, right? Everything's a newsflash, and a lot of it's contrived. But this is news worth reading. Today is the synaxis of the Saints Anagiri, which means unmercenary physicians. And you see we have two different sets of Saints Cosmas and Damian, right? One of Mesopotamia and the other one of Saints Cosmas and Damian of Rome. We have Saint Pantaleon there. All of these saints we have on a class by themselves, and it's because health is important to our happiness. So again, I just told you how news is physically bad for our health, and also mentally doesn't do so well either. But we celebrate these saints because health is important to our well-being, to our spiritual well-being, our state of spiritual happiness. Mrs. Jones was taken suddenly ill that night. A new doctor was called. After a look at the patient, the doctor stepped outside the sick room to ask Mr. Jones for a corkscrew. Given the tool, he disappeared, but several minutes later, he was back, demanding a pair of pliers. Again, he disappeared into the room of the moaning patient, whose moans began to increase, only to call out again, "I need a chisel and a mallet, quickly!" Mr. Jones couldn't stand it any longer. "What is my wife's problem, doctor?" "I don't know yet," he says. "I can't get my instrument bag open." So, but these saints and the our state of health is important to us, and these saints did wondrous things. And so, one of the Old Testament readings that we have from last night's Vesper service is from the Wisdom of Solomon, 3rd chapter. It says, "But the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and no torment will ever touch them." And we're going to get into this when we get into the Beatitudes, because again, the Beatitudes, we say the Middle English word blessed, but it literally means the state of happiness in God. And we'll get into blessed are those who mourn. But here's where the good news, reading the good news, not just the 4 Gospels, but the entirety of Scripture, comes in handy. Because happy are those who mourn, because the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and no torment will ever touch them. In the eyes of the foolish, they seem to have died, and their departure was thought to be affliction. You see? There were atheists even way back then. Actually, there are a lot more of them than there are now. And they're going from us, in certain places, and they're going from us to be their destruction, but rather they are at peace. For though in the sight of men they were punished, their hope is full of immortality. Having been disciplined a little, they will receive great good, because God tested them and found them worthy of himself. Like gold in a furnace, he tried them. Like a sacrificial burnt offering, he accepted them. In the time of their visitation, they will shine forth and will run like sparks through the stubble. They will govern nations and rule over peoples, and the Lord will reign over them forever. Those who trust in him will understand truth, and the faithful will abide with him in love, because grace and mercy are upon his elect, and he watches over his holy ones. And then the next reading is from chapter 5 of the Wisdom of Solomon. It's a good book if you never read it. "But the righteous live forever, and the reward is with the Lord. The Most High takes care of them. Therefore, they will receive a glorious crown and a beautiful diadem from the hand of the Lord, because with his right hand he will cover them, and with his arm he will shield them." So we need to not get dispirited, even in times of mourning, when things are not looking so good from an earthly perspective. We might be in the process of losing something or someone, a person, a job, maybe even our place to live. But happy are those who mourn, blessed are those who mourn, because of these things that I just read in the Wisdom of Solomon. But one of the things that we have to do is keep ourselves away from wastes of time. And I will tell you, honest to goodness, I realized that watching more than 1/2 hour of news per day was a waste of time. You want to be happy? Watch a 1/2 hour or less of news. Because when we do things that waste time, and no matter what it is, if we do too much of anything, it's not good when it wastes our time. Be it games or so on, right? That's why parents have rules for kids. Get off that game, right? You've been on it for 2 hours. Stop wasting your time, right? Because we're called not to be spiritual deadbeats. We can't be a spiritual deadbeat and be happy at the same time. A man pleaded with his psychiatrist, "You've got to help me, it's my son. What's the matter?" Said the psychiatrist. "He's always eating mud pies. I get up in the morning, and there he is in the backyard eating mud pies. I come home at lunch, and he's eating mud pies. I come home at dinner, and there he is in the backyard eating mud pies." The psychiatrist reassured him, "Give the kid a chance. It's all part of growing up. It'll pass." "Well, I don't like it," he says, "and neither does his wife." Dumb. We can't be deadbeats. We can't waste our time. Because we will be held accountable. Our time is lent to us, and it needs to be redeemed. And we need to ask God to redeem it. We need to not take it for granted like we sometimes do. Letting days or weeks pass, and not seeing the blessings around us, not taking the time to notice and count all the good things that are within our lives. And even some of the things that we think are bad are really good things in our lives. So instead of wasting your time with negative news, start thinking on these things. Start looking at even some of the things where you thought, boy, this is pretty lousy, God. Why'd you put me here, right? Why'd you put me in this situation? Instead say, wow, I didn't see that. And reading the good news helps open your eyes a little bit to see the blessings you used to think was a curse. To start moving and progressing in things. And instead of wasting time, to redeem it. To become a happy person. Being a blessed person. Because happy people make the world better. Unhappy people make it worse. Happiness is something we have to try at. It's a discipline that we must do. It's through the practice of the virtues. And it's above all giving our time to the things of God. May we do it, and may we be happy both in this age and the age to come. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.